Guys, my favorite weather of all time is here finally. After all year, I love nothing more than to step out of the house on a nice, crisp October morning and have 40-mile-an-hour winds blowing like 15,000 different allergens into my eyes and mouth. I look forward to this all year. And now it's finally here, and I just wanted to share that celebration with all of you.
It is the sneeziest out there. But is it worse at this time of year or in the spring? I can never tell.
'Tis the sneezing.
I think it's just bad whenever the winds are high, right? Like because there's something about like those days, and it doesn't really matter which time of the year it is, but those days kick up everything. And so you just feel it as you're trying to breathe. And then for the people who have allergies, it just makes everything worse.
Does anybody not have allergies in Sacramento? Like, I feel like part of the City of Trees thing is that you're allergic to something.
This is the point of the show.
You don't get
where we
any
just,
tree
like,
allergies or anything like that? No pollens or?
I don't. And it's really interesting because I do get contact dermatitis, and I have since I was a child. And so maybe that's how my allergies show up.
Mhm.
This is a deja vu moment.
Yeah, we probably talked about my contact dermatitis, maybe not on the show.
We're
but
nearly
like,
at 200 episodes. So
yeah, so I'm sure I've mentioned this at some point before, but I do get like, if something touches my skin, I'll get like a little like temporary thing. It's like by the time I, shower or the day is over, like it's gone, but I do get that. But that's the only thing. I don't get the sneezies and the itchy eyes and the sore throat. Like I don't get any of those things.
Transplants seem to have it a little easy. Well, I guess you've been here a while.
Nope.
But my first few years here, I didn't have allergies, but now
Same.
they hit me kind of.
They got me late.
Generally,
Well, I've been here 11 years, so
Yeah, I think
12
you're just
not
like,
consecutively.
You're just one of those people that's like, it's not. Nate doesn't have them either, and it's real. I mean, I don't wish allergies upon anyone, but it's very frustrating when I'm like, my throat tickles, I can't breathe out of my nose, my eyes are watering, and people are just like, what's wrong with you? Are you sick? You have COVID? I'm like,
it doesn't
"No."
get that bad for me. I just get like, I'll do really loud sneezes that annoy people, but like I kind of have the skin thing that Flo gets.
It's
yeah, let's talk more
contact
about our
dermatitis.
weird rashes and stuff. What other like skin, kind of
I
weird
would
skin
love
stuff do you
to.
guys get?
Well, I have all the skin stuff. Like my
Yeah.
skin is like it's a thing, right? Like I mean, adult acne, like the whole thing. I have a very intimate relationship with my dermatologist.
Really?
I see
Yeah.
no adult you have a very clear face.
I manage
complexion.
my adult acne so well, but if I don't, it's bad.
Oh,
So right under my left butt cheek.
Mhm. Let's go.
now we're getting
Left cheek,
somewhere.
right cheek, left cheek, right cheek. Yes.
True
I
life.
feel you on that, Flo. You know what's funny is that I always got like really bad acne, like around my mouth for
Mhm.
like my whole, basically ever since I started puberty until like an embarrassingly short time ago. I was like, what if I just wash my face before I go to bed? And it
Yes.
immediately stopped
Yes.
happening. I put up with this for no reason for like more than 30 years. And then I was
Tyler.
like,
Pretty
I'll just
funny.
wash my face before bed, and it cured the entire
That
thing.
is-
Like, no problem.
Tight.
Tyler, I have a whole routine. I use like 10% benzoyl peroxide and like
Oh.
as just part of my like
You're like bleaching
before
the
my
pillowcases.
moisturizer. Yeah, like it is a thing. And I've done 2 rounds of Accutane in like once in yes, I like and then going to see my mom at 71 and like going to spend time with her and seeing her acne management stuff. I'm like, does it ever end? Like, how
That's
are you
funny.
in your 70s still trying to? But I have a really good prophylactic regimen at this point, and so I don't typically have flare-ups. But if I get lazy about any of the things, it really can get bad.
So for the layman here, I think I'm
What-
judging from some looks that when we hear prophylactic, we hear condom.
Right.
Yes,
I want to
but-
hear more about Flo's condom regimen.
Body condoms.
yes,
Yeah.
body condoms.
You know
No,
what? That's a great idea for
Hopping around
allergy
like you're in a
season.
sack race all day.
Body condoms for allergy sneezing.
oh my god. I mean, yes. So
And
I
they
mean,
would be COVID friendly.
we typically use the term prophylactic to describe like condoms or things, but generally it's anything that you're doing to prevent disease or a bad, in particular, health outcome. So that's the general definition of it, but it sometimes has been used specifically to talk about like
I have only ever heard the word prophylactic used to talk about condoms, birth control.
interesting. Okay.
I realize
I've
I'm
only
not a
ever heard it to
scientist.
describe phylactics who have progressed beyond amateur level.
Mhm.
You know what?
Yeah.
It's because you ride in
It's no
different circles now.
AAA phylactic or no Bush
we're-
League
we're-
phylactics.
We're out of that.
It's the pros.
The
right,
Oh my
prophylactic.
right.
goodness. Oh my
And
Except
then-
nothing less.
Anaphylactic. What's that? Is that related to this term?
Well, anaphylactic is obviously not the same as prophylactic because it means that you are having the opposite reaction in terms of like it's an allergic reaction to something. So you have not prevented disease. In
Mhm.
fact, you are potentially, minutes away from, not being with us anymore. So I don't know in terms of root word if they're like
When I eat shellfish.
yeah, I don't know in terms of I'm assuming that root word
Aspartame.
like yes.
I love this.
Wait.
I learned
Yeah.
a lot about science.
Yeah.
I learned a lot
Yeah.
about our skin
But
issues.
yes, but we do talk about like prophylactic measures. Like if there is a bat in your house, you might be given, rabies treatment prophylactically because we don't know if you have rabies. We want to give it to you to make sure.
You're being proactive.
Yes.
I am going to
If there's a
start
bat in your
using
house.
the word prophylactic at my morning team huddles.
Mhm.
I love it.
I'm going to start talking about my morning coffee as a prophylactic
Mhm.
because drinking my morning coffee means I'm not going to want to cut a bitch later.
That's
Mhm.
absolutely that is actually the dictionary definition of prophylactic.
Preventing a negative health outcome. Yeah.
Yes. Yes.
So I could refer to like sunglasses as prophylactics.
They technically are in terms of, your
Put on my
your
prophylactic.
your
My ocular
Hang on, guys, I got to
prophylaxis.
pick off this prophylactic. We're inside.
yeah. I mean, they're your eye condoms, right? Like that's what they're doing.
Oh man,
Mhm.
sunglasses are eye
You can't be
condoms?
out there raw dog in the sun.
Right?
No,
No,
absolutely
no.
not.
Not in your mid to
Mm-mm.
late 30s.
Mm-mm.
Yeah. I mean, like some of us are
Be
a little
smarter than that.
yeah. Once you're a little bit older, you get it. You shouldn't be doing that.
Right.
Well, we've been
Wow,
going on about
lessons.
this for about 10 minutes, so maybe we should actually start this Tuesday show.
I don't know. I like this one, this stuff way more.
All
Love
right.
it.
All right, let's do it.
Voices, the things they said. Voices, some from those dead. All the voices heard. Voices, things we say. Voices, they're in your head. All the voices heard.
Hello, everyone. You have Kempa.
And you have Skylar.
And Shannon.
And Flo,
Full house.
I love it. And it's the right beat, like
It
there's
feels
nobody
good.
missing. It just
Yeah.
feels nice. It's predictable. My brain likes it.
It feels right. Yeah. After, I mean, March will be kind of the 2-year anniversary of us all coming together because that's when Flo got wrangled into this mess.
Cue
But
Tony.
it's
our
pretty
anniversary.
impressive, right? We've been going this long. So that's really exciting to me. but I guess discussing that too, 2 weeks ago was actually the 2-year anniversary of me deciding to relaunch the podcast. I think in the
It's your
next
anniversary.
Yeah, and then in the next few weeks will be the anniversary of the first ever episode after that little whatever it was I did at that cider house, saying we were going to start up again. In a few more weeks, it will be the 2-year anniversary of Skylar and I doing the iconic Bad Faith Daryl episode, which I think is still top 3 in all-time downloads.
Yeah.
And yeah, soon after that, Shannon joined us as a guest, and we sort of said, please, will you join us? And she said yes. And then they had Flo on as a guest when I was out of town one day. And they were saying, hey, what is this COVID thing? Flo told them, and boy, did that end up being a thing we talked about a lot ever since then.
Turned into kind of a big deal.
Yeah, a little bit. And so
Never heard of it.
So it's interesting. I mean, like, just coming around, even considering in my head that we're closer to 2 years than 1 year, is really sort of astounding to me, in all these regards. But, at this moment, as knock on wood, the Delta surge has started to go down a bit in California. Things are starting up again, right? Skylar, obviously, in a very high profile way, got a very interesting, cool job a few months ago. Myself, I've been working full time as well, and that's super secret. I can't tell anybody about it till I'm done. And I think we all kind of realize, like, we want to make sure that we still love this show and we love what we're doing, and trying to make this work and everything run on time and being proactive in our episodes has been a challenge for us in the last 2-3 months. So we want to let our Tuesday listeners know, we already let our Friday folks know, that we will no longer be doing the paywalled episodes. So, hopefully this doesn't change too much for too many people, but we will be doing once a week, Tuesdays only, every week. Skylar brought up the idea that we should increase the frequency of our meetups, which I 100% support. We will still have some patron-only material as well, possibly patron meetups. We'll work that out as we go. But we just wanted to thank everybody who's been here along the way. Everyone, not just who's been a patron, but there's been so many people who believe in this show who can't afford to be a patron, or, all these things that, or who on principle say, my consumption of my media should be free, and have said, I'm only going to listen to Tuesday episodes, which we respect as well. But we wanted to just say that to everyone. And I just realized I've been going on for a bit. So does anyone want to add to that?
No, I think you said it all.
Okay. Sorry. Okay. Yeah. So that's it. We are a Tuesday free for everyone show, and I'm feeling pretty good about that. But we still do really, really want, need, and appreciate the support. It goes to hardware, it goes to all sorts of different things, and we'd really like to build this out and continue to keep building. So thank you for everyone who does support us. One more little announcement I just wanted to say, and we've had an episode already discussing what happened to the college credit history and civics teacher of Natomas, who has been targeted by far-right extremists. They've been putting up flyers on him. They've been doxing him, giving his home address, his phone number, and this is all because the superintendent of the school district decided to play a game with these far-right folks. This has really been on the rise for the last month and a half. This hasn't abated for this person. And so we've had far-right people coming down from wherever it is they live. I don't know if it's like the Yuba area or if it's the foothills or what, but they've been coming down and they've been terrorizing people in our region. Not just this person. Now they've started randomly picking other people who partake in progressive causes, doxing them, giving their numbers, names, addresses, and saying that they're, go get them, right? We're saying they're dangerous. And we just wanted to let folks who might not know yet that this is a thing that's been on the rise the last month and a half, and that it's really important that the community bands together and takes this on, because we know that cops will protect the Proud Boys from the left. We've seen it happen over and over again, and I think folks should know about that. And if you have any questions, if you want to be a part of how to push back, please reach out. I can keep you in the loop on sort of what can be done and sort of how you can help keep your neighborhood safe out in the downtown area. Anything to add there?
I think it's important that for people who have not been following this closely to understand that, like, a lot of times when Proud Boys get up to their nonsense, it's like 3 of these dorks and they're not very organized, and they kind of come down and bumble around and get mad about something for a week and then leave. And this is not like that. This is this is like somewhere in between 10 and 20 of these guys who are pretty well organized, who are clearly communicating. And the eeriest part to me is that they seem to have a budget to do this.
Mm-hmm.
So this is a concerted effort. This is bigger than just like a handful of these Hucklebuck dorks. This is
And there's still
well-organized, well-funded. Well, there's still Hucklebuck dorks, but they are Hucklebuck dorks who are being organized and funded by somebody who is not an idiot.
Right.
And this to me this feels different than other Proud Boy actions in Sacramento of the past.
Fully
and
agree.
I think that people should like have that in their brains, that this is not just another thing that the left is yelling about Proud Boys about. This is somewhat more severe.
Yeah, it's jarring. I've never seen this level of, honestly, this level of threatening behavior and acrimony. And it worries me. It makes me think that something's coming. Also, I'm just surprised. How do all these people have all this time on like a Thursday night? It continues to baffle me. But I mean, maybe that's why you join the Proud Boys. You don't have much else to do. But folks, please keep an eye out for that. And we keep us safe. And honestly, I don't think we can rely on cops on a lot of this stuff. So that's something that we have to, it's a mantra we have to continue to have for each other. Anything else there? Yeah. Okay, we're good. Why don't we just talk about the news of the day then?
Okay.
I say this every time. That's the transition I've been using too much. I got to stop doing that. Today
was very windy. That's what we're talking about.
was very windy.
Correct.
And
actually, this isn't that funny, because technically the wind could turn into bigger news because it's like a big, huge fire danger because it's so high. So
Yes.
knock on some wood. The wind, we are using it for comedy. It could actually turn out to be the news of tomorrow, and hopefully it is not.
Right. PG&E is shutting down power for tens of thousands of people. It's a serious thing, as it always has been, during fire season. Thankfully, we're at the tail end of fire season, but that doesn't end until we actually start getting our rains,
Right.
full swing.
Yeah. But what we wanted to talk about today was the final, sort of the tail end of the legislative session, within, 30 days of the legislature ending. Governor Newsom had to decide if he was or was not going to sign or veto or let die all of these different bills. And he ended up actually signing a huge amount. What was it, like 90%? Something like insane.
Yeah,
He only vetoed 8%. Right.
yeah, but that also sometimes kind of like it feels like an artificially high number, because
Sure.
what happens is bills that he's hinting he won't sign get converted into 2-year bills.
Yeah.
And also, this is a smaller bill package than usual because legislators were only allowed to introduce a certain number of bills because of COVID. So all of that plays into this, because there are a number of bills that didn't actually make it to his desk.
Okay, that's good to know. There were 836 proposals that lawmakers sent to his desk. Of those, he signed 770, 92%, and vetoed 66, 7.9%. The big thing that stood out to me, and we haven't talked about these folks in a while, so I'm excited to talk about them, is that the cops, law enforcement in California, you losers. You big losers. They lost. Look at these. Well, look at all these things. Okay. All right. This is the lobby that was once considered a third rail in California politics, right? These are the folks that you never mess with, right? The peace officers of California, the cops. And look at everything that they lost here. And like I'm open to people talking me off this joy ledge here, but here are 4 things that Newsom signed. 1, cops now cannot legally block journalists from covering protests. If they do that, there is now actionable legislation, right, that you can invoke in the courtroom.
Well,
I guarantee
they
they'll
can't
do that
unless they think that there's a really dangerous situation, and then they can. And that
Sure.
is still going to be up to whoever the cops are on the scene to decide.
That is a very wide hole in this bill that they will probably be. Was that weird? I made a face. I saw a face there when I said wide hole.
My reaction was completely inappropriate.
Okay. That was a gaping
Maw.
really gash in this legislation that I could have been overlooked by legislators. You know, it's but how does one work around that? How does one? I don't know the answer to that.
I mean, I think no matter what, it's good that it passed. Like, I mean, like with the rest of these, the 4 that you're going to talk about, Dave, every single one of these, it's ridiculous that these weren't already the law.
Right.
And so there's nothing here that's like, I guess like, there's nothing here that's super crazy. It's all just stuff that's like, yes, obviously this should be the way that it is. And the cops not blocking journalists from covering protests is like a no-brainer. Like, it's like,
Right.
Yes, of course that should be how it is. I don't understand how it ever wasn't how that is.
Right. The fact that the ACLU of Northern California had to get involved during the George Floyd protests in summer
Right.
2020 here in Sacramento, right? Just so journalists and independent journalists could go do their jobs, you know, go try and inform people of what's happening in the streets, because no one else was allowed to be outside because there's a curfew that's been invoked. That curfew was invoked for totally absurd reasons too. But this is really important stuff, and it's an overreach that isn't like a far right politician was doing this overreach, right? This was Darrell Steinberg, our ostensibly progressive mayor, brought in the National Guard to enforce a curfew, right?
Mm-hmm.
And these are things where, you know, there was all this gray area on like, well, can independent journalists go out? Can they not? Do you have to be a member of the B, which of course is owned by interests of capital? Not to say that there aren't some amazing people working there, but you see where some of the concerns are here for folks, right? And And like, I knew that if I went out, what do you laminate a thing that says Voices River City and say I'm a journalist? Like, they don't care.
I would not show
Right.
that to the cops. Just a heads up.
Also
Don't
true.
show your laminated Voices River City card
Why
to like
not?
get
Cool.
yourself out of an ass beating by the cops.
Right. We're their favorite people.
Yeah. Well, apparently now they have to let me report it out, but that's a big question. Like, would they let me report it out? What is considered a journalist? Because the state does not give out a journalist card. And I'm glad the state doesn't do that too, right? So there's going to be gray area on who is and who is not considered a journalist by our police forces.
Mhm.
And these are things that will be settled in courtrooms, I think, in future years. So yeah, there are some holes in that one, as we said before. But yeah, also, as Skylar said, it's a goodie, right? Like, I'm glad this passed, you know?
Yeah.
Number 2, the state's Commission on Peace Officers Standards and Training can now decertify officers for wrongdoing, effectively kicking them out of the profession. This is another one where it's like, wait, this wasn't a thing you could do.
Right.
Yeah.
California is one of 4 states in the country that didn't already have this. So we are so far behind the curve on this. It's like, and again, like, is it good that it passed? Yes. Should it have been passed a long, long time ago? Yes. Like, imagine like a group of doctors being like defending, like, if they have a doctor who like does malpractice and like intentionally kills his patients or whatever, and then just goes and gets a job at another hospital on the
Right.
sly, and like all of the doctors being like, this is the way that it should be. It's like, what? No, like, this is a no-brainer. Like, this guy shouldn't be practicing medicine. The exact same thing applies. And it is like, I don't know, again, happy to see it happen. It's a no-brainer. And it's good that we finally caught up to where the rest of the country has already been with this.
California is really strange on things like this. I mean, when you were like, we're one of like 4, states that like, yeah, we do this thing where we are either like leaps and bounds ahead of everybody else, or just like embarrassingly behind. But it doesn't feel like we're like in the middle of things in this way. That's really confusing to me, because it gives you a little bit of whiplash.
Yeah. Yeah, you wonder about that and how everyone calls us so progressive, but the state was the opposite of that 25 years ago, and it's kind of funny that when people are kind of waking up to some of the things that were in place before that, and I guess again, this does have to do, I think, with the police unions, right? PORAC, right? The Peace Officers Research Association of California. They have how many members? It's like, they're gigantic. They have, here, I'm on their page. Let me see.
Let's take that. Shannon, how many do you think they have?
1
I say-
squillion.
17.
17, 1 squillion. How many public safety members, Flo? Somewhere in between.
39.
It's gonna be like 7.
What? Are you saying like how many humans are involved are 39?
Is it like 40,000?
Yeah, it's 77,000 public safety members and over 930 associations.
I was close.
I can't tell who was being,
17.
well, I knew a squillion wasn't serious, but, and also 17, I don't, okay. Anyway, you're
We
all
were just
trolling me.
We were just trolling you and throwing out
Trolling
random numbers.
Kempenite. Okay, got it.
Yeah.
Got it. It's very large. It's a very large union, and it's a union people were afraid of for a long time, right? And I think that is why, and it's what a lot of legislators told me when Senator Skinner was going after the Peace Officers Bill of Rights a few years ago, and that has changed. The veil has lifted, and you're realizing that the Wizard of Oz is a man behind a curtain, right? And I think, and I want someone to, I want to hear that I'm wrong, because I think I might be wrong, but like, I feel like this could be the beginning of the end, not necessarily the end for PORAC or whatever, but like the beginning of the end of their reign as this untouchable behemoth in Sacramento legislation.
I think it's certainly possible, and I think this opens up the door for us to really reconsider the power dynamic in the state in particular, at both the state and the local level. So I think this is a really exciting development, and you know what it brings up for me is just this continuing pattern of a lot of these like pro law enforcement policies losing both in the legislature and also when we went to the ballot last November, right? And so there was a big, push back against that. And I'm actually wondering what we can do to mobilize some of that energy and attention. I know it's obviously taken place over a lot of years, but how we can mobilize some of that energy and attention to some of the other, issues that we really want to get people on board with, because while I was really proud of California for, like allowing people who had been convicted of, felonies to be able to, to have their voting rights restored, and to push back against, trying to repeal some of the more progressive measures that had been passed in 2014 and 2016 as it related to like decriminalizing, and changing those, the discretion that was included in terms of who was charged with a felony and who was charged with a misdemeanor. It also is like kind of telling that we're willing to do that, but then we're like voting against racial equity and like getting money for kids, right? And I think that same pattern holds here as I'm looking at some of the things that Governor Newsom either stonewalled or just outright vetoed, is that when it especially comes to racial equity, this governor's not great on that. So there were a lot of bills that were actually coming to him that have been converted to 2-year bills, so they're not quite dead yet. But part of that was out of negotiation with him because of just a lack of commitment. And then there are some that he vetoed, like reducing the chronic disease burden among the racial disparities in chronic disease among children, that he vetoed because he basically said, we got this already. Like we were doing stuff for adults, and we have healthcare.
Can you lay this one out for folks?
Sure. So this bill is Senator Rubio's bill, or was Senator Rubio's bill, Senate Bill 682. And it set a target that by 2030, the state would be aiming to reduce the chronic disease disparities among children by 50%, and set out metrics for that, and a plan to bring together all of the California Health and Human Services agencies to be able to work on this. And they came out with, after it passed the assembly and got to the Senate, it was headed to appropriations, and conversations with the governor's office, they said, we gave a lot of money in the budget this year, so that should be good, right? And then the Health and Human Services Agency said, we have data on this stuff, and also we do a lot of stuff for adults, so these kids are fine, right? Like the kids are all right, right? And so then the veto letter came. We kind of knew it was coming based on those conversations, but it's an example of like not understanding prevention, right? Not understanding that if you address chronic disease in children, then fewer people start out their lives sick. And we know that the life course trajectory is that most of us get sicker as we age. So if we can have fewer kids with diabetes, and fewer kids who, are experiencing major mental health episodes, fewer kids who are missing school because of asthma, right? If we can handle that early on, we increase the likelihood that people have a longer and a healthier life. And the idea that we have major racial disparities that are showing up in people under 18 should trouble us all. And it should be something that this governor is committed to, but we didn't see that. So I'm glad he signed the Momnibus bill, which was really trying to protect, in particular women of color who are, giving birth. And that's really important, but it doesn't abdicate his responsibility to address children, to, declare racism a public health crisis, crisis for the state, and to really think about racial equity as it relates to all of the work that's happening, because
And that
the
should have been probably
should have
included
been-
in the
absolutely
Momnibus.
at Momnibus
Mhm.
bill. Yes.
That is a great name, by the way. That's how you know you're probably gonna win, when you
Yeah.
have a great name like that.
Yeah.
Yeah. I have two more police bills, and then
Please go for
we can
it.
open it up to other things. But I just wanted to say that there were two more that passed that the cops are probably shaking in their boots over. One, Californians now have increased access to police misconduct records. This is basically a follow-up. It's an addendum to Senator Skinner's really important bill that created transparency that the Peace Officer Bill of Rights had obscured for the people of California. And this is just making it stronger and stronger. So that's another great one. It's one step forward. It's not necessarily where we need to be on transparency. Transparency is super important on stuff like this. But it's a goodie, and I think it's just an objectively a goodie. And then the fourth one being, and this is a fun one, there are now new massive restraints on when cops can shoot protesters with rubber bullets. Thoughts?
What are the restraints?
I mean, thoughts are great, right? Like, first and foremost, I mean, this should not be something that is a widespread practice to begin with. And so there are sometimes when a bill comes out and I think to myself, yes, this is a really good bill. Also, this bill should have never been necessary in the first place.
Right.
And this is a prime example of that.
I'm like, I didn't really read it that carefully. What changes? Like, what are the situations in which they were allowed to blast protesters with rubber bullets that they are no longer allowed to do that in?
All of them was the answer to that first question.
Before it was like, if there was like a quiver in your ankle, you were like, oh yes, I will shoot you now with these rubber bullets. Or if you were like, I don't like the way that guy winked at me, then I can shoot them with this rubber bullet. Now, allegedly, with AB 48, it would limit police use of rubber bullets and other less lethal weapons at protests and demonstrations to certain situations, such as when someone's life is in danger or to bring a dangerous situation under control after other means don't work. Departments would also need to release reports on their use of such weapons. Now, I think there's plenty of room to be a little skeptical of this, but this does pave a way for police departments to think like, oh no, we better be a lot more careful with this or else we're going to get sued a whole lot. Or maybe they don't care. What do you think?
I think anything that goes from whatever we think to an absolute discretion, right, to requiring there to be something. I mean, it's still obviously, you know, any restrictions can come with people abusing them or just saying, yeah, I felt threatened. My life was in danger. This was out of control, right? Like, but
he reached
right
for his
now,
waistband type stuff, right?
Right, but right now there's no standard at all. There's nothing to. It's just like they use them, and that's the end of the story, and that's their, you know, right to be able to do so. And so I think this is one of those things where it's like, it's a good first step to be able to not have it just be carte blanche. You can do whatever you want, and there's no, you know, there's no standard or no recourse for it.
I think it's one of those things where, like, yeah, it's good to have it down on paper, but it's not like the potential for a lawsuit has ever stopped a cop from bad decisions before. So, you know, I do, step in the right direction. But do I think it's actually going to cause a law enforcement person to stop and be like, oh, hold on, I shouldn't use this rubber bullet because blah blah blah? Probably not.
What it could do, and I think this is important, is open the door for especially local jurisdictions or for the posts, the police officers standards that I never remember what it stands for, but for them, for them to come up with like some standards for what is and what isn't. And it just, to me, it's like that added layer of like scrutiny, that added layer of attention to just the fact that like, you can't just do this without somebody having to, like, one of the provisions in this is that there has to be a reporting on like when they were used and how, like, that makes a big difference in terms of just being able to even spotlight what happened. Because right now they're not required to share that information with anyone. So journalists can't even come back after the fact and say, we think you shot rubber bullets. How many? They're like, they don't have to tell you that. Like, so it's some of those things that I always like to remind us that, every piece of legislation isn't going to save the world, but it does create the landscape for future legislation and for changes in culture and changes in expectation. And I think that's what this one is ultimately stepping in the direction of, is like, we really don't want you to be doing this. And so we're trying to give you some pause to begin with. And that will probably, build hopefully over time.
Yeah, I'm not shitting on the thing. I'm just saying time will tell.
Yeah. To that point, Flo, I guess that reminds me of when you look at, let's get hyper local here for Sacramento. When you look at Sac PD's budget, there is zero granularity to it. You ask them, you request from them, give me what all of your money is going to with as much granularity as you have in your ledgers. And they give you something that is laughably opaque, laughably high level. And you're like, I don't know what any of this is going to.
Right.
And they know that they don't have to tell you.
Right.
And they don't have to tell you until we put into law something that says you have to tell us to this granularity that this is where your money is going, and like, that's a first step towards multiple steps after that. Because once we find out, like, oh, well, this amount is going to, I don't know, like, I guess it's not going to lawyers' fees because that's just other parts of the city budget perhaps, but like, this is going here, this is going there, this is how much went to rubber bullets. Like, this is something that can get folks who are constituents really thinking about, like, oh man, is that where my tax dollars are going? Is that where my Measure U dollars are going? And people can start thinking more deeply about what they want legislatively moving down the road.
Yes. I mean, what I'm reminded of is, so, back in over the summer, the police commission and the Measure U committee had a joint meeting. And in advance of that meeting, some questions were shared with the police department that we wanted to get answers to. And the answers to the questions were so laughably bad that, like, I didn't even know what to do with some of the answers. Like, when we asked about, like, what are the data and metrics that you're going to use to move progress forward, and they said the department will be successful if it recruits, hires, and retains a diverse group of employees. Like, that's their metric for public safety in the city of Sacramento, is they want more brown officers. What do you do with that when you're like, I want to know what your goals are and what you're trying to do with it? And they're like, yeah, no, we're not going to tell you that. Or when we ask them, like, what's the cost per capita? And they said that, lots of people come in and out of the city every day, and so they can't tell us that.
What?
No,
because we have open city borders.
What is the cost per person served? And what is the cost per capita? And they said those numbers are difficult to calculate as there are many people who visit, work, and travel to Sacramento on a given day. That is a direct quote.
Incredible. Incredible.
Like they just won't
no
answer
respect.
The questions.
Yeah, no, they have no respect because they have never, ever within the last two generations been really questioned on if the money going to them is serving the people or not.
Yep.
So anyway, those were the 4 bills that stood out to me, that it just seems like things are changing. You know, I think the Asantewas, the anti-police terror projects of California are, their message is resonating, and how could it not? Like, how could it not after the last few years? And it seems like things are moving forward. Are we where we should be? I mean, like, I can't answer that. I would probably answer no, nowhere near where we need to be with things like that. But it's like, it's nice to see a step forward with stuff like that. Any thoughts on that before we take a look at any other bills? Cool. You're all making the exact same face.
I was just like, I just talked a lot, so I was.
Well, somebody talk to me about a bill that either you were happy got signed, or one that you were miffed that did not, by Governor Newsom.
I mean, I have 2. I picked the 2 like least consequential ones. One that I am happy to see signed is that we are going to stop selling gas-powered leaf blowers
I wondered if you were going to bring...
as of 2024, which rocks. It rocks for a lot of environmental reasons, but it rocks even more for the reason of they won't be annoying me daily every time I leave my house, hopefully in a few years from now. You can't tell me, like, the only opposition to this is that it's going to be very difficult for like landscaping companies and whatnot, which I do believe that like currently probably the tech for the electric leaf blowers probably is not quite up to snuff. We got somebody call Elon Musk. There's got to be somebody who can get on the workable electric powered leaf blowers that are quiet. And get that going. I just don't accept that the best that we can do are the gas powered leaf blowers. I don't think that's the best that we can do. I think we can do better. I say that as somebody who knows absolutely nothing about any of it.
I want to give a shout out to my dear friend Ben Young Landis, who has been on an anti-leaf blower campaign for ages. He is the founder of Capital Science Communicators, and he does so much good work on getting very much like climate science related issues really to the forefront of our public conversations by empowering scientists to be better public speakers and things like that. But this has been a hilarious vendetta of his to get these goddamn leaf blowers out. I mean,
the environmental impacts of these things are not insignificant at all. Like, I kind of just made a joke about it, but there's something in this article that's like, it's the same amount of emissions for an hour's use of a gas powered leaf blower. It's the same amount of emissions as driving from Los Angeles to Denver. So like, now think about how many of these things, think about how many of these things are going all over Sacramento all the time. Like, not only are they loud and annoying, and absolutely guys start using them before 7 a.m. even though they're not supposed to, but they do. Even beyond all of that, they are like a huge they're an environmental disaster. So get them out.
Depending on where you live in the city, you know exactly when it comes through your neighborhood. For me, it's Fridays, 8 a.m.
Mine, I just love whenever I cycle about Midtown and I ride past one, I'm like, all right, cool. Like, it's just a matter of time until this guy turns around and just blasts me in the face with a cloud of leaves and dirt as I ride by on my bike. I love it. It's one of my Sacramento favorites.
In the grand scheme of things, it's a quibble, but it is that one's a goodie. Yeah, I agree.
My less significant one that didn't make it that I'm bummed about also has to do with cycling. We did not pass the changes that allow bicycles to treat stop signs as yield signs and red lights as stop signs, which is trash. Once again, California is behind the curve. Idaho has done this. Several other states have done this. I understand why people who don't ride bicycles don't like the idea of this happening, but trust me, it is better for everyone and it is safer for everyone, and it is a bummer that we did not pass it. Especially because everybody, even people who like, let me, before we even get into this, let me just say right out the gate, it's not cool to just blow through stop signs on your bike without looking and with no regard for what's going on. I'm not defending that at all. That's super dangerous and that's a jerk move. But
that's not what this is.
Rolling up to a four-way stop when there's nobody there, like, it doesn't help anything for a bicyclist to slow down to a full stop. In fact, what it does, it keeps that bicyclist in the middle of the intersection for a lot longer than they would have been there had they not. And if they're, and if they're treating it like a yield, then yes, if another car is at the stop, then a cyclist is by law still has to yield to the right of way to that car. But everybody, not only is it safer, but it saves everybody time. Like, can you imagine if bike parties stopped at the stop signs? Like, it would shut down the whole town. The only reason that this thing works is because they just roll through them.
Yeah.
So this is AB 122.
122.
Is the Idaho stop thing, and then AB 1238. These are the two. The one was to decriminalize jaywalking, and the other was to allow cyclists to avoid stops. Both of those were vetoed, and in the veto message, it goes back to high rate of pedestrian or cyclist fatalities, which I feel like is, I mean, for one, that is legit, right? There are certainly too many pedestrian and cyclist fatalities, but I think it goes back to also understanding, like, I was gonna say meat and potatoes. I guess the meat and potatoes of the whole thing is, of like the jaywalking bill, for example, is no cars are around,
right?
So that would make it okay for folks to cross.
All of this should be moving towards decriminalizing these two behaviors and
100%.
just abolishing cars in those spots, and in as many spots as are possible.
And creating a space where we can, like, because these bills have been passed, can then work on the policy to make them so, right? Like, it's frustrating.
Again, it's incremental too. It's just like, we also have to make a more robust public transit system if we're going to start getting rid of cars, because there are some real issues class-wise and location-wise there. Shannon.
Yep.
You seem ready. What?
Do it.
What are yours? What are your win and loss?
Oh, I didn't do win and loss. I did loss and loss.
I want to hear both.
That makes sense. Honestly, I'm here for that.
Well,
Shannon.
The first one for me was AB 1238, which would have decriminalized jaywalking when no cars are present until 2029. But we talked about that. The other one was AB 226, which was creating non-hospital facilities for young people insured by Medi-Cal experiencing mental health crisis. And that
was vetoed?
That was vetoed.
This is what I'm talking about when it comes to I really hope that the children's movement and Children Now and some other folks come up with a really bad report card for Gavin, because he has really screwed over the kids in some pretty important ways. Yeah,
I think, this is one that I was hoping to see signed. because I think, you know, in my experience working with kids, folks under the age of 18 experiencing mental health crisis, there just is not a lot available for them outside of the emergency room, which just like doesn't work well, right? That it does not work well for mental health crisis. And there are just not enough inpatient mental health hospital beds for children or for teens. So creating a space where we could potentially have more specialized, trauma-informed care for children experiencing mental health crisis seems like a super tight thing, especially in a time when we are actively telling people to avoid emergency rooms unless they're experiencing COVID symptoms, like severe COVID symptoms. And after what will soon be 2 years of a pandemic, where kids have experienced really negative mental health impacts. I mean, along with everybody else who's living through the pandemic. And I understand the criticisms of this bill, which are, you know, creating residential treatment facilities for kids is just warehousing them. And, you know, is there money available? There's all of these, you know, you've got this bill, but is there actually a funding stream to make this happen? But the reality is that kids that don't have private insurance are often left with nothing. And I think we've talked about it before. I've heard of more like kid and adolescent suicide during the pandemic. Suicide being on the rise, and there are no treatment. There are just no options for families to reach out and get support. So it sucks, I think, that this didn't get signed.
Yes.
Because what happens when you like have a kid, you know what happens when a person is experiencing a mental health crisis and they go to the emergency room in non-COVID time. You end up waiting in the waiting room sometimes for days before you're able to be seen. What happens during a pandemic is you leave and take the crisis into a space that is not ready for the crisis.
Right. Where the cops will respond.
Or the cops, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow. How about you?
Yeah. Phil? So I have a win and a loss. And I didn't even think about it until I was like, oh, what do mine have in common? And they have in common my background in reproductive health. So my win is the stealthing bill, which
yes,
makes it so that it is actually assault to stealthily remove a condom without the consent of the person that you are having sex with. And this is incredibly important because it is non-consensual. And so it would be considered now sexual battery under the civil code. And you can actually sue your partner for damages. Those damages may include STDs and unintended pregnancy for some people who have sex. And so that is incredibly important, and probably also emotional damages and all of that, because it's terrifying. So I'm really glad that bill was signed. Then there is the bill that was not signed, unfortunately, and that is a bill that would have boosted family leave payments. And that one, so, right now, family leave is 60%. It would, or at least 60%. It would make it 70 to 90 of your highest earnings over the last year. And basically, in a time when we had $80 billion in surplus, the governor basically said in his veto that it would create significant new costs not included in the Budget Act, and would result in higher disability contributions paid by employees. And so they, he didn't want to sign it, and he's looking forward to partnering with the legislature to ensure that workers have true access to programs providing family leave. And I'm like, yeah, this could have been one of those true access programs had you not vetoed it. So I'm kind of tired of the state saying we don't have the money because you have the money for whatever you decide is important. And I really do think that this could have been a very important thing. If for no other reason than we do understand that, you know, especially early in people's lives, that time of bonding with children is incredibly important for brain development, for, you know, rest and recovery, especially after childbirth, and for just general family bonding. It's a stressful time where people aren't getting a lot of sleep, and there's just so much that's associated in terms of poor outcomes when we don't allow families to be together during that time. And it's just, we're one of the few, you know, wealthier nations that don't.
I'm glad you used that term. Yeah.
Yeah, that like don't.
I thought you were gonna be like developed or something.
No,
yeah.
Oh gosh, no. But we're one of the few wealthier nations that don't offer much longer leave and paid leave. And it's just really, it's really disappointing that, again, you know, California can't get this part right. Salud.
Allergies.
Gracias.
So
Yeah,
weird.
it is. It's another thing, like, I think, like, single payer healthcare, where people aren't, I think people just don't know how it works in other parts of the world. Like, there's like countries, like, I don't know, some of these magic Nordic countries where like you get like 2 years off or something when you like paid, when you have like an unimaginable amount of time off to, like, you know, be with your family in this time.
Yeah.
Like a time that doesn't even figure into the American mindset. And I feel like if other people understood like how much better these other places have it than we do in terms of these, then they would be outraged. Like it is.
And what if we could do this in a place that's really diverse, a
Right.
place where we all don't look the same like they do in a lot of these? Like, that could have been a real beautiful statement where it's like, it doesn't matter, like we all are taking care of each other, and that did not pass.
And I also just don't understand the rationale of like, oh, you're on family leave, so you're going to make less money than you were making when you were working because you have an additional mouth to feed. Like, help me understand how that how that lines up and makes good sense and would be a good thing for everyone. Like, I don't understand.
Yeah, it sounds like Newsom sided on the really with the capitalists there. I don't know how else to look at it.
not Gav.
Gav.
Yeah.
Gav.
Yeah.
Well, speaking of major disappointments, we only do one show a week now, so but you will, to console you, I wanted to inform you that we are going to continue to ask you for money at the end of the show anyway, even though now we are offering you substantially less in return for your contribution.
That
Dave,
is not true. That is not true. So let me just jump in here and say, I'm going to reframe this. What happened was, this was always the setup. And then we overachieved for a year and gave you additional content that you never asked us for, and that you were afforded because you were a patron. And now we have just gone back to where we were before.
This is the original setup, I guess.
This was the original setup.
Yeah. That's a good nice
anyway, so in the original setup where you get nothing and have no real reason to donate to us other than that you like the show, we hope that you liked the show.
Yeah.
And if you did, Dave, where could somebody go if they did like the show and they wanted to not only experience more of the show, but you know, wanted to pitch in and throw a couple bucks our way a month?
Yeah, that's a great question, and I do have an answer for that. There is a place where you can go to really find out what the big class struggle questions are in Sacramento. And that's bizjournals.com/Sacramento. And you'll find the 40ists who are under 40.
Right.
You will find the 50ists who are just the least tall. No, sorry. There is a place to go for
the
the
50 least tall people. Is that an
tolerable
article
is what I was going to say.
Oh,
And then I cut myself off. I already did
that makes more
joke.
sense.
I like the joke though. Okay, now I'm talking about voicesrivercity.com, where the perfect takes flow like
wine.
the fount of the I don't know. Yeah, exactly. Just like that. This
Like
one's for the YouTubers.
Like a snake.
Yeah.
A dancing
out of
snake.
the Mississippi source up in Upper Minnesota. We historically have done a lot of news and arts coverage. We did a lot of community essays in the first few years. We had a lot of fun with that. Current iteration, like I've said before, is the podcast. We're going to get a little more creative now that we're doing this once a week, but don't expect us to get too crazy. I'm definitely going to start doing local stage reviews more because there's just no outlets out there who are doing that. And I'm open to people considering doing other things. So feel free to reach out to Voices and see how we can do that. But at the end of the day, what we're about is trying to shift the narrative to something that's like deeply anti-racist, to something that is anti-colonialist, to something that is through a class lens as well. And we are really trying to do something that is not like your usual periodical. And I think we all take a lot of pride out of that. And so if you want to become a patron, it's patreon.com/voicesrivercity. You can find us at voicesrivercity.com. If you want to buy something from our store, it's voicesrivercity.com/shop. If you want to find me on Twitter, I guess we're on Twitter and Instagram as well, at Voices River City. The Instagram is hilarious. And then I am on Twitter personally at Kempo, YOUKNOWKEMPA.
You can find me on Twitter at Guillotine for You. That's Guillotine, the number 4, YOU.
I'm Shan N.D. Stevens.
I am Flojaune, FLOJAUNE.
What a beautiful team.
Truly,
Fantastic. Fantastic work, folks.
I
You really
miss these
did it.
times.
All right. Well, that's the show. Until then, we want you to know that we love you very much. And we want you to stay safe.
Stay sane.
Stay healthy.
And keep that mask on until we're like below 5 cases per 100,000. And then we'll see what we can do.
Or just in
That's probably
general
gonna be after
during flu
the
season.
aftershock jump, right?
Oh yeah, flu before you boo too. Get that flu shot before.
Get that flu shot. Get it.